All right, let's cut across to our policy editor in conversation with the finance secretary.
To you about the GAAR provisions. They were advanced. It was originally supposed to be a part of the DTC. It was advanced by a year. The government, of course, had some thinking behind it. But the fact that it has now been delayed by a year, you have perhaps taken into consideration the many concerns that the FII lobby or investors had raised with you. But do you also think at some level, while I know that you will say it has been done under no fear and has of course been done due to technical reasons and other things like that, but do you think at one level the government's handling of the issue perhaps comes under the scanner a little?
No, I think you're being very unfair on that. Fact remains that even though GAAR was in the DTC and introduced 2 years ago, it took everyone by surprise when we brought it in this current finance bill. Because everyone had anticipated that it would be along with the DTC.
That's right.
Concerns were raised because issues which were raised were significant, and last time also when I had spoken to you, I had mentioned that those concerns government would seek to address.
That's right.
Major concerns have been addressed, whether it is in terms of onus, whether it is in terms of the GAAR panel having an independent person, and also in terms of the authority on advance ruling also having to look into whether any arrangement is permissible or not. Having said that, there are still certain issues which are there. What we had interacted with the PE investors, we had interacted with the FIIs, we had asked them that please put your views before the GAAR Rules Committee.
That's right.
They did put across to the Rules Committee. Some of those concerns are being taken care of. Some points which are still there. They are concerned about the threshold.
That's right.
They are concerned in terms of can we list out and give examples as to what are permissible arrangements, what are impermissible. Now, able to list out, but so far that discussion is not completed.
I appreciate the point that you say that some of the concerns have been taken care of, the assessment panel for one, the whole onus thing for one. But let me also ask you a question here, that the initial cheer over the delay of GAAR, one had expected that markets will perhaps rally, one had expected foreign investors will come out and give you a huge vote of confidence. They perhaps did initially, but the initial euphoria seems to have waned off because I think everybody is waiting for the fine print and some of the points that you brought about. By when will one have absolute clarity on every issue on GAAR? Could you give us a timeline, and could you also give us some of the issues that you will perhaps come out and clarify subsequently?
As I mentioned, some of the concerns which have been raised before the GAAR committee, those are there, those would be taken into account. FM has already mentioned that he anticipates that the committee should be able to finalize its report and give it in a month's time. Now separately, we have also another committee which is to look into the aspects of international tax and transfer pricing, which I head, where again all stakeholders are there. I have also kept a meeting of that on the 25th of this month. So various issues which are still there, which different stakeholders need to raise, we would take that on board. Once those are on board, I think outer limit, if it's not 1 month, at most 2 months, we will come out with the GAAR rules so that everything pertaining to GAAR is then on statute, it is in public domain, everyone knows what is going to be there at the start of next year.
A quick clarification, when you say it has been delayed by a year, are you here suggesting that whether the DTC comes or not, GAAR will come into effect from April 1,
100%, 100%. GAAR, whatever has been now approved vis-a-vis the finance bill, and finally when the bill is approved by Rajya Sabha and the President, it is then on statute. The only point which has been mentioned is that it will be applicable only for income which arises with effect from 1/4/2013.
That's right.
So all the statutory provisions are in place. Then nothing else is required.
So whether there's a
this
DTC
is not to
or
say
not, yes.
This is not to say that DTC will not come.
I know, but we're just keeping all options open. Even if the DTC wants to happen,
absolutely,
the GAAR provision will come in.
Absolutely.
So you spoke about getting an independent person on the GAAR assessment panel, and that perhaps was also one of the concerns that the investors had raised with you in various meetings, because we spoke to them, you had shared that information with us. there are two questions to this. First, everybody would want to know what would the nature of the independent member be? Because the fear, I'll tell you, I'll share this fear with you. The fear is that the independent member may not be a non-government person. And a lot of investors here have voiced concerns that why can you not get somebody of repute, say an ex-IT professional or an ex-income tax person who will perhaps be at large, be fair? Because, I mean, that's a concern. How will you allay those fears? You've accommodated the concern that there should be an independent person on the assessment panel. But could you share with us the contours of how independent that person will be?
No, it appears you may not have seen the provision of the finance bill. It is already provided that the independent person shall be a person who is of the rank of Joint Secretary or above in the Ministry of Law.
I see. Okay.
So he will be a government person, but he will be not from the Department of Revenue. That is where the independence is. Now let me come to the basic issue that you are trying to say, that someone from the industry should be there.
Because all said and done, this is a governmental person at the end of the day. Even a person from law reports to the Union of India and is very much a, hand in glove with the government.
I don't agree with you. As I mentioned earlier,
what is the reservation in having somebody from outside the government?
Let me say, you have GAAR currently in 30 countries. In no country is there any independent person on a GAAR panel except Australia. And in Australia, the GAAR panel is not binding. It is only recommendatory.
I see. Okay.
So wherever it is binding, you do not have a person who is in any way outside the tax department. Having said that, let me come to the basic issue.
Right.
All tax matters have confidentiality. People don't realize if there is a company's case which is being taken up in GAAR and you have a person from private sector also on a GAAR panel, would that company want that its case is known to anyone in the private sector? It is absolutely unwarranted. People haven't thought this through.
Absolutely.
So this is an aspect that the individual has to be from government because there is an issue that the GAAR panel in India, the recommendation, it is not recommendatory, it is binding.
Binding in nature. But sir, I buy your argument. I agree with you that if everywhere else in the world there is somebody from the government on the panel, why have an independent person from the private sector? I buy that point. But why not have somebody who's been with the government, is of repute, has been with the tax department, understands the contours? Perhaps a retired Chief Justice of India.
As I said, issue of confidentiality.
All right.
So what you said is not to say that retired Chief Justice would not maintain confidentiality.
But I understand.
But what we felt was that from law, a person of the rank of Joint Secretary and above, who is not under the control of Revenue Department at all, who would give independent input, probably that serves the purpose.
Another concern that you have taken note of, and I think this was one of the big talking points between you and the investors when they met you eventually after it was announced in the budget, is that the onus, where does the onus lie? You've taken into consideration, you said the onus to prove GAAR provisions apply lies on the tax department and not on the assessee. But again, a lot of investors that we spoke to after you clarified this fear that eventually it may come back to haunt the assessee. How would you allay those fears? I know some of that is perhaps paranoia, but how would you allay those fears?
See, at that time when I had made the statement, some of the responses in media were that it is being verbally said. We don't know what will be there finally. Now they have seen it in the finance bill. So once it is part of statute, there is no question of any other doubt in this matter.
So you believe those fears are unfounded for and we should just perhaps breathe easy. A quick question also on GAAR, sir, is that at a conceptual level, the line between tax benefit and tax avoidance has been blurred a little. And this is something that a lot of tax experts have also voiced concerns on. In DTC, for instance, the tax avoidance was the principal trigger for attracting GAAR. But when the provision was introduced in the finance bill, and if I can just word it from there, it says, it's reworded to say main purpose or one of the purposes. Why did the government feel the need to change the language? Is it just to broad-base it, or are you trying to take, some other concerns into cognizance? Why did you have to make it so broad-based?
See, there is still a concern which people have indicated that there are certain words which tend to indicate that it would be deemed to lack commercial substance if that is one of the motives of reducing tax. Now that aspect we will take care even in the rules. When we are giving examples, etc., we would take care in that. So that point, again, someone can say this is being verbally said, therefore let us wait till the rules are out, we would take care in that.
So when you say you will take care of it, you will perhaps define it in black and white, that this is what the intention of the Finance Ministry Revenue Department is?
Absolutely.
And this is a concern that you will take care of?
Correct.
A quick question before I move on to other topics also on GAAR is that many people within the industry, even some of your people within the department feel that GAAR initially will perhaps lead to a lot of litigation. It is also a fact that India doesn't have the required judicial system in place to take care of some of these. Do you at one level voice similar concerns?
No. In fact, honestly, with the onus being purely on the assessing officer, it's not going to be easy for an assessing officer to determine an impermissible arrangement and the actual avoidance of tax thereon and then try and invoke GAAR. It's going to be very difficult, and as I mentioned earlier also when I had interacted with you, issue of invoking GAAR will come up only if there are very specific complaints with proof which is then provided to an assessing officer. Otherwise, how will an assessing officer get any idea as to an impermissible arrangement which is there? So, issue where you are saying that it will lead to litigation, I don't think. First and foremost, if an assessing officer has to consider, he would consider something 2 years down the road, 2.5 years down the road, and then when he's making the assessment and then he puts to his commissioner and then he puts to the GAAR panel and then they may go to the AAR, that itself is a process which may take about a year's time. Therefore, any cases coming for litigation is too far-fetched.
Are you here suggesting that the instances of GAAR may be so few that litigation may not arise, or are you saying you're trying to put a foolproof system in place where litigation will be minimized? Because the sense that I get is that, perhaps the instances will be so far and few that litigation may not arise at all. Is my assessment fair?
Both aspects. Point which I mentioned was that instances will be few, because it is not going to be easy for the assessing officer to be able to have the proof that it is an impermissible arrangement for avoidance of tax and therefore to initiate GAAR. Second aspect, of course, is we are going to use our time over the next 1 to 2 months to try and see that we make the exhaustive number of examples in order to say where impermissible arrangement would be there, which would be permissible arrangement, and try and make it a little bit more clear so that the number of disputes which may arise are minimized.
So, while a lot of concern has been raised on GAAR provisions, but the fact also is that it is a very potent tool to check tax evasion, one that perhaps has been rampant in India because of a lack of a system like this. Do you also, do you lose sleep over the fact that eventually the GAAR provisions that may come into existence may be a very watered down version of what you initially thought it would be?
Where is the question of watering down? The statute is now in place. But
you've given in on a lot of, you walked perhaps that extra mile to accommodate concerns.
Yes, that point I agree. But these are not non-genuine concerns. We have sought to address genuine concerns. Those who are going to operate from an impermissible arrangement, obviously they need to be worried. There is no watering down of GAAR and its implications as such, because once the finance bill is passed, GAAR statutory provisions will all be absolutely there.